Sergeant Major Koa's great frame loomed in front of Rip. "Think they've spotted us, sir?" Rip hated to say it. "Probably. Koa, can you estimate from the exhaust how far away they are?" "Not very well, Lieutenant. From the position of the streak, I'd say they're decelerating." The Planeteers looked at Rip. He was in command, and they expected him to do something about the situation. Rip didn't know what to do. The rocket launcher, their only weapon, wasn't designed for fighting spaceships. It was useful against snapper boats and people, but firing at a cruiser would be like sending mosquitoes to fight elephants. He sized up their position. For one thing, they were right out in the open, exposed to anything the Connie cruiser might throw at them. If they could get under cover, there might be a chance. At least it would take the Connies a while to find them. For a moment he thought of hurrying into the landing boat and sending out a call for help to the Scorpius, but he thought better of it. They weren't certain that Connie had spotted them. He would wait until there was no doubt. Meanwhile, they had to find cover. His searching eyes fell on the cutting torch. If they could use that to cut themselves right into the asteroid. Suddenly he knew how it could be done. On the sun side he remembered a series of high-piled, giant crystals of thorium. They could cut into the side of one of those. And with Kemp's skill, they might be able to do it in time. He called, "Kemp, Koa, bring the torch and fuel and follow me." In his haste he took a misstep and flew headlong a few feet above the metal surface. Koa, gliding along behind him, turned him upright again. He saw that the sergeant major was grinning. Rip grinned back. It was the second time he had lost his footing. They reached the peaks of thorium, and Rip looked them over. The tallest was perhaps 40 feet high. It was roughly pyramidal, with a base about 60 feet thick. It would do. "Kemp." The private hurried to his side. "Take the torch and make us a cave. Make it big enough for the entire crew and the equipment." Kemp was a good Planeteer. He didn't stop to ask questions. He said, "I'll make a small entrance and open the cave out inside." He picked up the torch and got busy. Rip smiled. The Planeteer was right. He should have thought of it himself, but it was good to see increasing proof that his men were smart as well as tough and disciplined. "Bring up all supplies," he told Koa. "Move the boat over here, too. We won't be able to bury that, but we want it close by." He had an idea for their boat. It was able to maneuver infinitely faster than the big cruiser. They could put the supplies in the cave, then take to the boat, depending on its ability to turn quickly and on Doust's skill at piloting to play hide and seek. Doust certainly could keep the asteroid between them and the cruiser. The plan would fail when the cruiser sent a landing party. They would certainly come in snapper boats, and those deadly little fighting craft could blast rings around the landing boat. The snapper boats had gotten their name because fast acceleration and quick changes of position could snap a man right out of his seat if he forgot to buckle his harness tightly. The solution would be to keep the landing boat close to the asteroid. At the first sign of a landing party, they would take to the cave, using the rocket launcher as a defense. The supplies began to arrive. The Planeteers towed them 2 crates at a time in a steady line of hurrying men. Kemp's torch sent an incandescent knife 3 feet into the metal at each cut. He was rapidly slicing out a cave. He cut the metal out in great triangular bars, angling the torch from first one side, then the other. Koa came and stood beside Rip. "I haven't seen the Connie's exhaust for a while, sir. They've probably stopped decelerating." we can't see them at all. Meaning what? Rip asked. He thought he knew, but he wanted Koa's opinion. They're in free fall now, sir. That could mean they're just hunting in the area. Or it could mean that they've stopped somewhere close by. They could be looking us over right now, for all we know. Rip surveyed the stars. If that's so, they're not too close, Koa. Otherwise they'd block out a patch of stars. Well, sir, Koa hesitated. I mean, if you were looking over this asteroid, and you weren't sure whether the enemy had it or not, how close would you get? Probably about 1 AU, Rip said jokingly. That was 1 astronomical unit, equal to about 93 million miles, the distance from Earth to the Sun. That's a safe distance, sir, Koa agreed with a grin. But let's suppose the Connie isn't as timid as I am, Rip went on. He might be only a few miles out. The question is, would he wait to get closer before launching his snapper boats? The tall officer answered frankly, I've never been in a space grab like this. I don't know the answer. We'll soon know, Rip replied grimly. A thought had just struck him. The Scorpius had trouble finding the asteroid because it was just one of many sailing along through the belt. But now the asteroid was the only one traveling across the belt. It would make an outstanding blip on any radar scope. It wasn't possible that the Connie cruiser had missed the blip and its significance. The Connie may be looking us over, Rip added, but I'll tell you one thing. He knows we've taken the asteroid. Koa looked wistfully at the atomic bomb which remained. If we had a way to throw that thing at them. But we haven't. And the thing wouldn't explode, anyway. We don't have the outside casing with an exploder mechanism, so it has to be turned on electrically. Rip could see no way to use the atomic bomb against the Connies. It was too big for use against a landing party. Besides, it would put the Planeteers themselves in danger. Ever have trouble with the Connies before? He asked Koa. More'n once, sir. Sometimes it seems like I'll never get a job where I don't have to fight Connies. Rip was trained in science and Planeteer techniques, and he didn't pretend to know the ins and outs of interplanetary politics. Just the same, he couldn't help wondering about the strange relationship between the Consolidation of People's Governments and the Federation of Free Nations. Connies and Feds, mostly Planeteers but sometimes spacemen, were constantly skirmishing. They fought over property, over control of ports on distant planets and moons, and over space salvage. Often there was bloodshed. Sometimes there were pitched battles between groups of platoon size. But at that point the struggle ended. The law of the Federation said that no spaceship could fire on a Connie spaceship or on Connie land bases, except with special permission of the Space Council. The theory was that brief struggles between men, or even between small fighting craft like the snapper boats, was not war. But firing on a spaceship was considered an act of war, and the first such act could mean the beginning of a war throughout the entire solar system. It made a sort of sense to Rip when he thought about it. Little fights here and there were better than a full war among the planets. Koa suddenly gripped his arm. Sir! Look up! The short hairs on the back of Rip's neck prickled. Far above, blackness in the shape of a spaceship blotted out stars. The Connie had arrived. Rip ordered urgently, Kemp. Stop cutting. The rest of you get the stuff under cover. Ram it. He hurried to lend a hand himself, hustling crates into the cave. Kemp had made astonishing progress. There was room for the crates, if stacked properly, and for the men, besides. Rip supervised the stacking and then the placement of the rocket launcher at the entrance. "All hands inside the boat," he ordered. "Doused, be ready to take off at a moment's notice. You'll have to buck this box around as never before." He explained to the pilot his plan to dodge, keeping the asteroid between the boat and the cruiser. "We'll make it, sir," Doused said. "I'm not worried," Rip replied, and wished it were true. He looked up at the Connie again. It was getting larger. The cruiser was within a few miles of the asteroid. As Rip watched, fire spurted from the cruiser, and it moved with gathering speed toward the asteroid's horizon. He watched the exhaust trail, wondering why the Connie had blasted off. "He has something up his sleeve," Koa muttered. "Wish we knew what." "Let's take no chances," Rip stated. "Come on." The men were already in the boat. He and Koa joined them. They stood at a window, watching the Connie's trail. The trail dwindled. Koa said, "Something's up." Suddenly new fire shot from one side of the cruiser, and it spun. Balancing fire came from the other side, and for an instant the three exhausts formed a cross, with the darkness of the Connie's hull in the center. Then they could see only the exhausts from the sides. The stern flame was out of sight. "He's made a full turn to come back this way," Rip stated tensely. "Doused, get ready." The Connie was perhaps 20 miles away. It grew larger, and the side jets winked out. A few seconds later, fire spurted from the nose. Rip figured rapidly. The cruiser had gone far enough away to make a turn. It had straightened out, heading right for them. Now the nose tube was blasting, slowing the cruiser down. He sighted, holding out one glove, and gauging the Connie's distance above the horizon, and his heart speeded. The Connie was right on the horizon. "Ram it!" Rip called. "Around the asteroid. Quick!" Acceleration jammed him back against his men as Doused blasted. No sooner had he recovered than acceleration in a different direction shoved him up to the ceiling so hard that his bubble rang. He clawed his way to the window as the Connie cruiser flashed by, bathing the asteroid in glowing flame. There was a chorus of gasps from the men as they saw the thing Rip had realized a moment before. The Consops cruiser was playing it safe, using its rocket exhaust as a great blowtorch to burn the surface of the asteroid clean of any possible life. The sheer inhumanity of the thing made Rip's stomach tighten into a knot. No asking for surrender, no taking of prisoners, not even a clean fight. The Connie was doing its arguing with fire, knowing that the exhaust would char every man on the asteroid's surface. The Planeteers watched as the Connie sped away, blasted with side jets, and turned to come back. Doused tensed over the controls, trying to anticipate the next move. He delicately touched the firing levers, letting out just enough flame to maneuver. He slid the craft across the asteroid's surface to the side away from the Connie, going slowly enough that they could watch the enemy's every move. "Here he comes," Rip snapped, and braced for acceleration. The landing craft shot to safety as the cruiser's nose jet flamed. Doused was just in time. Tiny sparks from the edge of the fiery column brushed past the boat. Rip realized that the Connie couldn't know the Federation men were in a boat, dodging. The cruiser would make about 2 more runs, just enough to allow for hitting every bit of the asteroid. Then it would assume that anything on it was finished and send a landing party. "He'll be back," he stated. "About twice more. 3 at most." He suddenly remembered the landing boat's radio. "Doused, where is the radio connection?" The pilot handed him a wire with a jack plug on the end of it. Rip plugged it into his belt. Now his voice would be heard on the Scorpius. Calling Scorpius. Calling Scorpius. Foster reporting. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. Over to you. The answer rang in his helmet. Scorpius to Foster. Hold M, Planeteers. We're on our way. Here comes the Connie, Koa yelled. Rip braced. The landing boat shot forward, then piled the Planeteers in a heap on the bottom as Doust accelerated upward. There was a sudden wrenching crash that sent the Planeteers in a jumbled mass into the front of the boat. It whirled crazily, then stopped. Rip was not hurt. He shoved at someone whose bubble was in his stomach and cleared the way. Turn on belt lights, he called. Quick! Lights flared on. He searched quickly, swinging his light. The Planeteers were getting to their feet. His light focused on Private Bradshaw, and he gasped. Bradshaw's face was scarlet, and his skin was flecked with drops of blood. His eyes were closed and bulging horribly. Rip jumped forward, but Koa was even faster. The Hawaiian jerked a repair strip from a belt pouch and slapped it on the crack in Bradshaw's bubble. Rip wasted no time, either. By the time Koa had the strip in place, he had pulled the connection from his belt light. He ran the tips of the wires over the edges of the strip. The current sealed the patch in place instantly. Koa grabbed the atmosphere control on Bradshaw's belt and turned it. The suit puffed up. Rip watched the repair anxiously in the light from Koa's belt. It held. Rip reconnected his light as he asked swiftly, "Anyone else hurt?" Answer by name. There were quick replies. No one else had been injured. Run for the cave, Rip commanded. Follow Koa. Santos and Peterson, drag Bradshaw. The Englishman's voice sounded bubbly. I can make it. Good for you! Rip exclaimed. Call if you need help. Koa was already out of the craft and leading the way. Rip went out through a window and saw the cause of the trouble. Doust had been a hair too close to the asteroid. A particularly high crystal of thorium had snagged the landing craft. Rip looked for the Connie and saw it make another turn. They had only a moment or two before the next run. Show an exhaust, he called. The Connie must have blasted the opposite side of the asteroid while they were hung up. The cave was a quarter of the asteroid away. Rip stayed in the rear, watching for stragglers, but even Bradshaw was moving rapidly. Koa reached the cave well ahead of the rest, reached for a rack of rockets, and slapped it into the launcher.